My name is Clara, 41 years old, a lecturer in business administration at a university in Denver. My husband, Lucas, and I had been together for 17 years. To anyone looking in from the outside, our life appeared enviably complete. A warm suburban house, dependable careers, holidays planned months in advance, photographs that suggested stability and ease. But beneath that polished surface, fractures had been spreading for a long time. I had sensed them, felt them in quiet moments, yet I chose not to see them for what they were. That evening, Lucas was in the shower. The steady rush of water echoed down the hallway, filling the bedroom with a familiar, comforting sound. Then there was another noise, much smaller but infinitely sharper. A single notification chime from his phone, left face up on the nightstand. I had never been the kind of wife who checked her husband's phone. Trust, to me, was sacred, something you protected fiercely. But instinct has a way of cutting through principles when it finally decides to speak. I stood before I had fully processed the decision. The screen lit up with a message that was devastating in its simplicity. Table for two confirmed at Lumiere Friday at 7:30 p.m. Window seat as requested. She'll love it. I didn't move. Lumiere was one of the most exclusive restaurants in Denver. Lucas and I had once talked about going there for our 10th anniversary, a dream we postponed and eventually abandoned because of one of his many urgent work trips. I had never stepped foot inside, and now he was arranging a candlelit evening there for someone else. I hadn't intended to unlock the phone, but my fingers acted before my mind could intervene. The passcode was still our wedding date. 4 digits, simple, familiar. What opened in front of me was anything but. Messages stretched back nearly a year. Photos, notes, entire conversations with a woman named Sophie. Blonde, young, confident. She worked in internal communications at the law firm where Lucas was a partner. They spoke constantly about coffee, about meetings, about the dress she wore to bed. There were pictures, too, from a supposed 2-day work trip to Santa Fe. Sophie curled into Lucas's arms, his smile wide and unguarded, so different from the man who had once sat beside me during the financial collapse of 2008, promising we would survive anything together. The room felt suddenly airless, my ears ringing with a sharp metallic hum. I wanted to scream, to hurl the phone across the room, to shatter something tangible. Instead, I stood there, hands clenched, heart pounding like it was trying to escape my chest. "Have you seen my blue tie?" Lucas called from the bathroom, casual, unbothered, as though nothing in the world was wrong. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been, sealing the eruption inside me. "Second drawer," I answered, my voice flat, distant. That night, I lay beside him, turned away, listening to his breathing even and slow, while my body remained rigid, coiled tight. How many times had I explained away his distance as stress? How often had I ignored the late nights, the unfamiliar perfume, the pressed shirts that didn't feel meant for me? Now I understood. I wasn't blind anymore. The next morning, I kissed him goodbye as I always did. "Good luck with the Japanese clients," I said lightly. He smiled, completely unaware that I had already seen the Friday night he was planning for Sophie. When the door closed behind him, I called HR at the university and requested 3 days of leave. I didn't need time to fall apart. I needed time to think. I had spent 17 years being the perfect wife. Now I was done with that role. I sat at the kitchen table, staring into a mug of coffee that had long since gone cold, feeling hollowed out. In less than 12 hours, the life I trusted had collapsed. Yet instead of despair, something precise and steady began forming inside me. I didn't want shouting or broken plates. I didn't want tearful apologies delivered out of obligation. If Lucas wanted a special night with Sophie, he would have it. Just not the way he imagined. Lucas's email was easy to access. His calendar was immaculate, almost arrogant in its neatness. Friday, 7:30 p.m., Lumiere, window seat, wine arranged in advance. A flawless evening for two people convinced they would never be caught. I searched Sophie's name in the firm's internal directory. Sophie Walker, Internal Communications. Her social media appeared within minutes. One more click led to Ethan Walker, her husband, an executive architect with kind eyes and an open smile. I didn't know him, but I knew betrayal, and I knew no one deserved to live in ignorance. I couldn't simply call him and confess everything. I needed something careful, believable. As a lecturer, I had one useful tool: guest invitations. I composed the email with professional precision. Dear Mr. Walker, my name is Clara Whittemore. I teach project management at Metro Denver University. We are hosting a seminar series on sustainable urban design and were impressed by your work in the Rivergate Business District. I would love to discuss inviting you as a guest speaker. I've arranged dinner this Friday at Lumiere at 7:30 p.m. to go over details. It would be a pleasure to meet you. I sent it before I could hesitate. 2 hours later, his reply arrived. Polite, enthusiastic. Friday worked perfectly. I read it again and again, my pulse quickening. He didn't know it yet, but he would. The truth deserved daylight. Calling Lumiere was the final step. A table for two near the window, I said calmly, and if possible, close to the reservation under Hamilton and Rothman. We're potential collaborators. The half-truth slid easily from my lips. It worked. Friday night was set. I arrived early, wearing a teal silk dress Lucas once said was too bold. My hair was pinned back, makeup restrained, heels still stiff from the box. I hadn't dressed to impress. I had dressed with purpose. The restaurant glowed with candlelight and soft music. From my seat, I could see their table clearly. I ordered a martini and waited. Ethan arrived on time. He was exactly as he seemed online. Kind, thoughtful. We spoke easily about work, about cities and education, and then Lucas and Sophie walked in. Lucas in the blazer I bought him, Sophie radiant in red, laughing like the world belonged to her. When Lucas pulled out her chair, my chest tightened, but my voice stayed steady. I watched. The touches, the smiles. When Lucas's eyes met mine, his face drained of color. I excused myself and crossed paths with Sophie near the restroom. Recognition dawned in her eyes. Please, not here, she whispered. Why not? I asked calmly. Isn't this perfect? I reminded her gently that Ethan deserved the truth. Lucas appeared behind her, stunned. I called Ethan over and said simply, Ethan, this is my husband, and this is your wife. The silence was absolute. I walked away then, leaving them in the wreckage. I returned to my table, signaled the waiter, and asked quietly for a private room. Within 5 minutes, we were ushered into a discreet private room. Soft lighting, the table set for 4. I sat down first, Ethan beside me. Lucas and Sophie sat across, stiff-legged students caught cheating on their final exam. No one spoke. No sound of chairs scraping, no clinking silverware, just distant music and heavy breathing mixed into the air. Lucas broke the silence. Clara, I don't even know where to start. Start 3 days ago, I said, pouring water into my glass. When you got the reservation confirmation and I happened to see it on your screen, that's when I knew. Both of them froze. Sophie looked down, and Lucas opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. You don't need a monologue. I read every word, Lucas. Every photo, every secret trip to Santa Fe. Don't try to imagine what it was like reading that. I remember exactly how it felt. Sophie whispered, I am sorry. I turned to Ethan. He's my husband, and she's your wife. The least we deserve is the truth, said to our faces. Ethan sat still, eyes locked on Sophie. What are you going to tell me? That it was a mistake, or that you were just finding yourself? Because clearly you found quite a lot in the arms of another woman's husband. Sophie wept. I never meant for it to go this far. It started as a joke. I felt lost, unappreciated at home. Lucas, he listened to me. I listened too, Ethan said, voice shaking. I spent entire weekends reworking your office layout. You said you wanted a space that inspired creativity. I believed that. Lucas turned to me, voice trembling. Clara, I know I messed up. I destroyed the most valuable thing in my life, but please don't let this be the end. I smiled, not gently. It was the smile of someone who had weathered a storm and had nothing left to lose. Lucas, the end didn't start tonight. It began the moment you looked at Sophie the way you used to look at me. That's when you decided that wedding vows were just words, not a commitment. He lowered his head. Sophie turned away, tears falling freely. I pulled a hotel key from my purse and placed it on the table. I'll be staying at the hotel across the street tonight. I already booked it. Nothing surprising. Lucas, you're welcome to go home if you still have the nerve. I'll return Monday morning. It would be best if you weren't there by then. Lucas panicked. Clara, please don't do this. I'll do anything to fix it. You can't fix a house that's rotten at the foundation, I replied. I used to be the kind of woman who always forgave, but now I've learned that sometimes forgiveness is just betrayal of yourself. I stood, adjusted my dress, then turned to Ethan. I'm truly sorry you had to find out this way. He nodded silently. Thank you for showing me the truth. It hurts, but I needed it. I looked at the other two one last time. I wish you both luck, not because I forgive you, but because everyone pays for their choices, sooner or later. I walked out of Lumiere without looking back. The sound of my heels echoed sharply on the stone path, cutting through the still night air of the upscale district. In my hand was a small clutch holding the key to room 1203 at the Celeste Hotel, a suite overlooking downtown where the lights never go out, even when the heart already has. When the front desk greeted me with a professional smile and handed me the key card, I nodded silently. Inside the room, I locked the door, slipped off my heels, and walked to the large window. The amber lights of the city reflected against the glass, casting my silhouette onto the wooden floor. For the first time in years, I saw myself clearly, without Lucas beside me, without any shadow hiding the loneliness that had long slept inside me. I sat on the edge of the bed. Then I cried. Not the movie kind of sobbing, and not silent tears either. It was a surge of anger mixed with pain, raw, harsh, uncontrollable. I cried for 17 years of youth, for nights waiting by the door, for lies wrapped in flowers and wine, for all the times I thought I was loved, when in truth I was just being slowly replaced by something younger, newer, more temporary. I don't know how long I sat there. I only know that when the knock came, I was still hugging a pillow, eyes burning. I walked over and peered through the peephole. It was Ethan. I opened the door slightly. He wore a long coat, hair slightly tousled, exhaustion etched across his face. I'm sorry to bother you, he said, voice. I didn't know where else to go. I opened the door wider. Come in. We sat in 2 armchairs by the window. Outside, cars kept passing by as if the world hadn't cracked wide open tonight. Ethan was silent for a moment, then sighed. I still don't understand how you knew everything and managed to sit through dinner like that. I gave a soft laugh. I didn't sit still. I waited for the right moment. Some truths, if you let someone else say them, they lose their weight. He nodded. Thank you for not letting me keep living in a lie. We talked like 2 strangers who shared the same wound. He told me Sophie was the first person who believed in his wild designs, and he had thought if anyone got him, it was her. I told him Lucas was the one who slipped the wedding ring on my finger in the rain, promising never to lose his way. We were both wrong. I think I'm going to file for divorce, I said, my voice hollow. Ethan looked at me unsurprised. I don't think I can live with someone who can pretend that well either. I looked him in the eye. I'm not angry at Lucas anymore, at least not the way I used to. Anger doesn't last forever, but there's one thing I know for sure. I will never let myself stay in a relationship that chips away at my self-respect day by day. He was silent, then quietly said, "You're stronger than I thought." "No," I replied. "I'm just the last one willing to look at the truth." That night, Ethan stayed in a separate room in the same hotel. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "If you need a friend to get through this, I'm here." I nodded. "Thank you, Ethan. Tonight, I think you understood me better than my husband did in over a decade." After he left, I stood watching his figure disappear down the long hallway. In that moment, I didn't feel strong, but I felt lighter, as if for the first time in years, I had set down a suitcase full of stones I'd been dragging for far too long. Lucas could beg, could promise, could write hundreds of apology emails, but my heart had closed to him the moment I saw the way he looked at Sophie, the way he used to look at me, and I didn't need anyone's permission to move on. I would walk forward on my own with the same feet that had carried me through every storm. The next morning, I left the Celeste Hotel while the city was still wrapped in fog. I returned to the house where Lucas and I had lived for 17 years, not to hold on, but to clear out what remained of a marriage that had silently ended long ago. Lucas was already waiting in the living room. He sat on the couch, hair messy, eyes red, shirt wrinkled and half-buttoned. As soon as I walked in, he jumped up. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice cracked like he'd rehearsed it for hours. I set my purse on the table, calm. "Then talk. I know I messed up. I know I betrayed you, and there's no excuse for it. But we can get through this. I'll do anything. Counseling. I'll cut off all contact with Sophie. I already told her she left." I cut him off. Lucas froze. "What?" "I heard from one of her coworkers. Sophie quit her job and moved back to Santa Barbara this morning. Apparently, she couldn't handle the office finding out." He sank into the couch, hands in his hair. "You told everyone?" "Not out of revenge, but because I refuse to live in the dark. I called your mother, Mark, and Jenna, even your college friends, the ones you always tried to impress. I told them exactly what happened, that you cheated on me for nearly a year, hiding it behind fake meetings, disguised work emails, and kisses shared with another woman while I was cooking dinner, waiting for you to come home." He shook his head, panic rising in his eyes. "You've destroyed my reputation. Do you know what the company will think? What my friends will say?" I laughed bitterly. "You care more about your reputation than your marriage? Then let me remind you, you destroyed it, not me. I just stopped protecting the mask you built." He stepped closer, trying to take my hand. "Clara, please don't do this. I love you. I really do." I stepped back. "Lucas, love can't survive in the shadows of lies. If you loved me, you wouldn't have called someone else baby while still holding me in your arms at night." He collapsed to the floor, shoulders shaking. "She meant nothing. It was a mistake." "No, Lucas. It was a series of deliberate choices. You had the chance to stop. Every time you texted her, made a reservation, walked out with a lie on your lips, but you didn't, and now I won't either." His voice cracked. "If you leave, you'll ruin my life." "No," I said, eyes locked in his. "I'll save mine." The following week was filled with Lucas trying everything to win me back. Calls, texts, flowers at work, even a 4-page email detailing his journey to clarity after that dinner. I didn't reply. I'd heard enough apologies in my life, and now I wanted silence to say everything. I hired a lawyer and filed for divorce. 3 weeks later, a close friend happened to see Lucas and Sophie at a cafe in the suburbs. They didn't look radiant anymore. 2 days later, I received his last message. I tried to move on with her, but there's nothing left. She doesn't smile at me anymore, and I don't see you in her eyes. I didn't respond. A few days after that, I saw he had deactivated his social media accounts. and temporarily stepped down from the board at work for personal reasons. A man who had once lived for appearances was now facing himself with nowhere to hide. Spring came earlier than usual that year. I noticed it one Saturday morning when sunlight poured through the windows of my new apartment, casting warm streaks across the dark wooden floor. I was making coffee when my phone rang. It was Ethan. "Coffee at Tanner's?" he asked simply. I glanced at the clock. 9:12. "I'm in. Give me 15 minutes," I replied, smiling. Since that night at Lumiere, Ethan and I, once strangers, now survivors of the same shipwreck, had stayed in touch. First, daily check-in texts, then regular weekend meetups. No pressure, no expectations, just two people who had lost everything, slowly learning how to navigate the world again. That morning, he was waiting at our usual table, notebook open, 2 lattes already ordered. "I guessed right, didn't I?" he smiled, sliding one toward me. "I'm starting to think you're the only one who remembers what I like," I said, taking a sip. "Lucas got my coffee order wrong for 17 years. We both laughed. Not the painful kind from before, but something lighter, calmer. "How have you been?" I asked. "Officially finalized the divorce last week," Ethan said, nodding as if to confirm it for himself. Sophie didn't say much, just left a short note. "I'm sorry for making you lose faith in love." I looked at him. "And did you?" He thought for a moment, then met my eyes. "No, because I'm learning to believe again, from scratch. But this time, not in promises, in small, consistent actions." His answer left me quiet. We didn't need to say more. In that silence, I knew we were walking the same path, even if we hadn't named what was growing between us. The next months passed in rare peace. I returned to teaching, enrolled in a weekend photography class, and for the first time lived without the label of being someone's wife. Ethan, besides running his firm, began speaking at my student seminars. He never missed one, and each time he stood at the front sharing his passion for design and humanity, I felt inspired all over again. One day, after a session, I invited him to my new place. Small, but filled with greenery and light. We had pizza on the balcony, watching the city shimmer. "Do you think we're changing?" I asked, pulling a knit blanket over my lap. "No," he said, turning to me. "I think we're returning to who we really are." I stayed quiet. His answer sold my heart in a way I hadn't expected. One early summer evening, walking along the river after an outdoor concert, Ethan suddenly stopped and looked at me seriously. "Clara, I'm not in a rush. I don't want to push you into anything you're not ready for. But if one day you want to try again, not with another marriage, but just a relationship built on trust, honesty, and no secrets, I'm ready." I looked at him. His eyes held no pressure, only patience and sincerity. I smiled. "I'm not ready to love again the old way, but if it's the way you described, starting from friendship, sharing, no hiding, then maybe I've already started without even realizing." Ethan said nothing. He just took my hand gently, without urgency. That hand didn't promise anything grand, but it told me if anyone was going to help write my next chapter, it was the man standing before me. And under the soft lights, with a breeze brushing over the water, I knew I was stepping into something quiet, imperfect, but real. And this time, I wouldn't have to sacrifice my self-worth to keep love, because the person beside me had once shattered too, and now we were both rebuilding from those very pieces. A year after that fateful night at Lumiere, I received an invitation to Professor Martha Benson's retirement celebration, my PhD advisor, and someone I deeply respected. The event was held at Hotel Lieri, elegant and calm, just like her. I arrived early in a simple yet elegant navy blue dress, wearing my mother's pearl earrings. In my hand was a small gift-wrapped package, a rare book she'd often mentioned. I expected nothing more than a quiet evening of conversation, laughter, and old mentors. But the moment I stepped into the ballroom, I saw a familiar figure. Lucas. He stood near the wine table, thinner with gray at his temples, still polished but without the arrogant confidence he once wore so easily. When he turned and saw me, we both seemed to pause for a beat. Lucas walked over, wine glass in hand. "Lara," he said, his voice rougher than I remembered. "I didn't think you'd come," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. He gave a faint smile. "Professor Benson is the last one still in touch with me after everything." I nodded. "She's someone who always sees the best in people." Lucas looked at me for a long moment, as if searching for the right words. Finally, he sighed, eyes lowering. "I owe you an apology, a real one, not because you need to hear it, but because I need to say it." I stayed silent. "After everything blew up, I lost more than I expected," he continued. "Not just reputation or business relationships, but my own self-respect. I tried to hold on to Sophie for a while, but it fell apart faster than what I destroyed with you." I looked at him. No anger, no resentment, just the feeling of speaking to someone who had long stepped out of my life. "I hope you find peace," I said softly. He nodded slowly. "And you? Are you okay?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'm rebuilding life on my own terms, and I'm not alone." Just then, Ethan walked into the room. He wore a charcoal shirt and understated blazer. When he saw me, he smiled, the one I jokingly called the light at the end of the tunnel. Lucas followed my gaze and nodded when he understood. "He's a good man," Lucas said. "You deserve a fresh start." I placed my hand over my heart. Once shattered, now whole. "Thank you," I said sincerely, "and so do you. Just start again, only when you're ready not to hurt anyone else." Lucas stepped back, as if giving me space to move forward. That night, Ethan and I sat side by side at the celebration. We chatted with friends, took photos, and shared a slow dance under golden lights. No grand declarations, no scripted future, just the quiet, honest presence of two people who had once fallen apart, and now were rebuilding, not from scratch, but from cracks healed with time and trust. As we left the party, I held Ethan's hand and looked up at the starry sky. "You know," I said softly, "there was a time I thought betrayal was the end." Ethan gently squeezed my hand. "And now, I think it was just a break, a pause, so I could turn toward a better path." And we walked on without looking back, because the past had been closed with forgiveness, the present was painted with trust, and the future was quietly unfolding in every gentle hand I held that night. 1 year after the storm, I was no longer the woman who gave up everything for a husband who betrayed her. Now I am Clara, strong, steady, and free. I didn't just survive the pain, I found a new beginning built on honesty and respect. Betrayal once broke me, but it also led me to a better life. I learned to place my self-worth above blind love, and in the end, I chose myself with no regrets. What do you think of Clara's choice? Was she too strong, or was it exactly what a woman needs to do to protect her dignity? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful family stories.